My name's Tim Grove. Could I have the first slide, please? Yeah, there you go. Thank you. I was the chair of the Mercury and Moon Committee, and what my vice chair, Brett Denevi, and I will do today is go over our activities and talk about some of the things that we've recommended. So we should start out with a thanks to everybody. We had a great panel. There were 14 of us total. Everybody really contributed to the Decadal survey. We also would like to thank white paper authors who contributed and the mission concept study participants that contributed. And we had many presenters in open sessions that presented information to us, and then just the lunar science community as a whole. So the next slide, please. So here's what we did. Between October 2020 and September 21, we had 25 meetings, 6-hour-long meetings in general, with many open sessions and invited presentations and then closed discussions. We reviewed approximately 60 white papers that were relevant to the moon. We reviewed 3 previously executed mission concept studies, one on in situ geochronology, which included the moon, another on an Intrepid rover, and then the third on the Lunar Geophysical Network. We identified priority science questions. We identified and performed additional mission concept studies for consideration. One, the Endurance South Pole Lake and Basin rover and sample collection, which you'll hear about in just a minute. And then a second one, Inspire, which is an in situ polar volatiles rover. Then we prioritized the mission concept and technical risk and cost evaluation input to give to the steering group so they could make their decisions. And we drafted high-level priorities and recommendations for consideration by the steering group. Next slide. That's you, I believe, Brett, right?
Yeah, so Robin showed this list of the different themes and the priority science questions. And the moon is really distributed through almost all of these priority science questions. You can see the emoji scale there on the right-hand side, where the moon features in all but 2 of these. And so that really, I think, reflects the immense amount of knowledge that we have gained from the moon, from past human exploration and past and present science investigations, that has allowed the moon to inform so much of what we know about the solar system and the promise that all of this holds for our future knowledge of the solar system. And then particularly in this last theme about life and habitability, this reflects the special place the moon has as the Earth's partner in space. So much of the Earth's early history has been lost to its active geology. Crucially, the period of time when Earth became habitable and when life first emerged. So we look to the moon to discover Earth's lost early history. And I think as you go through these different chapters and you look at the different recommended research activities, there are a whole lot of themes and topics that can be used to really prioritize different lunar science investigations, individual research grants, as well as missions. Next slide, please. And because of the format of the Decadal survey here being grouped by theme rather than by body, as in past surveys, there is one place I wanted to point your attention to, box 22.2. This is the science themes for lunar exploration that were mentioned earlier, but these also really highlight some of the kind of top level, what Jen has referred to as decadal level science goals that we can use as our kind of guide for accomplishing the really critical and transformative science that we need to do at the moon in the coming decade. All right, next slide. All right, go ahead, Tim.
Okay, had to unmute. Thank you, Brett. So I'm just going to mention briefly endurance, a very ambitious undertaking that that we decided needed to happen in order to understand the history of the South Pole Aitken Basin. And James T. Keene is going to talk about it in a talk directly after Brett and I are finished, so I won't go into any details right now. So if we could move on to the next slide. So like South Pole Aitken Basin, the Lunar Geophysical Network has been recommended in previous decadals, and we think it's still an extremely high priority to examine the moon with a global long-lived network of geophysical instruments to really determine in much better detail the structure, the internal structure of the moon's interior. The next slide, please. And also, we talked a lot about the Commercial Lunar Payload Services CLIPS program, which we think is a promising and innovative approach that will benefit the PSD and lunar science. And we strongly suggested that NASA should continue to support this CLIPS. And once it demonstrates success in reaching the lunar surface, NASA should develop a plan to maximize science return from CLIPS by allowing investigators to propose instrument suites coupled to specific landing sites through the CLIPS program. And the next, I believe that's yours, Brett.
Yes, so now that we've been through the kind of more fun parts, all of the incredible science of the coming decade, the missions, we get to the org chart, which Jen showed the larger version of that. This is just focusing in on what's going on the SMD side. And though this is, not the fun part to talk about, it is critical that this ends up being done correctly so that we can ensure all of the other portions that we're so excited about happen. And so I just want to draw your eye here again to what is happening with the Planetary Science Division, which funds but does not manage LDEP. I'm not sure who's at the podium if they can point to things, but so that's that red arrow pointing over to LDEP, the Lunar Discovery and Exploration Program that funds but does not manage a lot of different elements involved in lunar science. You can see they're pointing to different components below. And so if you can, thank you. I'm not sure that the arrow helped, but all right, next slide. Okay, and so I think that the kind of summary of where the committee came out on this is that when we heard from the different people in open session, what we heard is that SEO is, that's the Exploration Science Strategy and Integration Office that we heard about yesterday. SEO is focused primarily on interdivision and directorate activity coordination and commercial partnerships. Whereas, the goal of the Planetary Science Division is they're responsible for accomplishing lunar science goals. And so where you have LDEP funding many, but not all lunar programs in PSD, the problem then is also that it does not manage or coordinate them all. And you end up with no single organizational chain that has the authority for executing lunar science missions and for accomplishing lunar science. And we did hear about the development now, I believe Ryan talked about that yesterday, about the development of a strategy for lunar scientific exploration. But there is no program director or chief scientist to lead such a plan. And so the recommendation from the committee was that the Planetary Science Division, and it should be within PSD, should execute a strategic program. Right now, LDEP is not a program, but it is a budget line. So it should be a program to accomplish planetary science objectives for the moon with an organizational structure that, again, aligns responsibility, authority, and accountability, straightens out that confusing org chart. And then following that, a structured approach to setting science goals and measurement objectives at the moon, led by the lunar science community, can help to prioritize what this LDEP program focuses on. Next slide. So Robin already went over the budget, or Phil did actually, but just to reiterate, there is a lot of support for lunar science in both the recommended level, actually in every budget scenario, there's a lot of support for lunar science. And I'm probably going over time, so I'll just note here that LDEP is recommended funding at 4.76 billion in this decade in both the recommended and the level budget scenarios, which is a substantial budget that should enable real transformational science from this investment that NASA is making. And if funding is less than this level budget, the decision rules are very favorable to LDEP and still includes the initiation of Endurance A, but with a later start in the decade. And I believe that is our last slide. Thanks.